this morning with How Majestic Is His Name. Let's stand together as we sing.
Oh Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Oh Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Oh Lord, we praise your name. Oh Lord, we magnify your name. Prince of Peace, mighty God. Oh Lord God Almighty. Oh Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Oh Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Oh Lord, we praise your name. Oh Lord, we magnify your name. Prince of Peace, mighty God. Oh Lord God Almighty. My God's a great God and worthy to be praised. My God's a great God. Oh, praise His holy name. He made the world so great. He keeps me by His grace, and soon I'll see His face. My God's so great. My God's a great God and worthy to be praised. My God's a great God. Oh, praise His holy name. He made the world so great. He keeps me by His grace, and soon I'll see His face. My God so great.
Can I hear an amen to that?
Amen.
Dear Father, we thank you for your goodness and your greatness. We thank you that you are the maker of the world, the maker of us, that you sustain all things around us and care for us. And we thank you for the opportunity to gather this morning to worship you, to fellowship with one another, to hear from your word, to be challenged by it, encouraged by it, warned by it, instructed. We thank you for the work of your Spirit in our lives. May he direct our steps. May he shape our thinking. May he help lead us through our emotions. And in our relationships, may we be a light that shines to the world of all that you are, of your goodness, your grace, your mercy, and your forgiveness. We thank you for the opportunity to sing praises to you and to your Son, Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. I have a couple of announcements. There's a bunch of stuff in the bulletin. Let me encourage you, if you didn't pick up a bulletin on the way in, pick up one on the way out. But there's a lot of things happening right now, and I want to bring your attention to some of them. This Saturday, Ithaca Pregnancy Center is having their walkathon, but it's in Cortland. If you want to be part of that, if you want to come out there, out in the foyer is some brochures about that. Printed in the bulletin is the address where that will take place, and that's in Cortland this Saturday. Next Sunday, missionary Kevin and Kenyatta Mackey will be here with us reporting in the 11 o'clock service. We're excited about them coming out. They were supposed to come a year ago, but COVID restricted their travel from Colorado. But they're here now, and they'll be with us in the morning next week. Next week, if you picked up any of the cards for backpack supplies for the backpacks for Trumansburg School, we'd like to have them back next Sunday. If you picked up any of those cards and you were purchasing some of those items, bring them back next Sunday. Sign up for Sunday School. We are launching Sunday School again on September the 5th, I believe is the date of Sunday. September the 5th, and if you have kids in Sunday School anywhere from age 0, okay, so 0 through grade 6, we'd like you to sign up so we kind of know what's happening in those classes. We're going to have prizes and awards for the kids during the whole month of September, and if you'd sign up, there's a sheet out in the foyer for that. In talking about that, we have a Starting Fresh ministry survey we would like you to fill out. They were in the bulletin. There's also a stack of them in the foyer. This ministry survey is going to help us in starting some of our new ministries back up again in September. Someone asked me a question about adult Sunday school. In the past, we have had adult Sunday school classes where a class meets here and it just kind of is taught, and it just might last 20 weeks, it might last 752 weeks. Okay, the topic might just go on and on and on. That's a possibility of those kind of classes. We've had gender classes where we've had just a ladies class. We have had short elective classes. One of the things we're asking you is what kind of class you would be interested in attending. A short elective might be a class that's just 8 weeks long. And we tell you right up front, this is 8 weeks, this is what we're going to study. We've also talked about the idea of having just a coffee and fellowship time available for people who maybe bring your children to Sunday school and you'd like to just meet some of your Christian friends here for that hour and have a place that happens here in the building so that you don't necessarily feel guilty because you want to spend some time with your Christian friends. We don't want you to feel guilty about that. And then if you think there's something else that should happen in an adult Sunday school hour, we'd ask you to fill it out. And then we ask you questions about the Sunday evening service, Wednesday night prayer meeting, family fellowships that include a meal, or home Bible studies that wouldn't. We'd like you to fill something out. We had these available last week. 5 people filled them out. I was one of them. So I want you to know I filled one out with my preferences as well. But we'd ask you to fill that out. That will help us to have some input. The deacons and the elders are having a meeting in 2 weeks, and our regular meeting, and we're going to talk about the things that we find in that survey. So if you do that, that would be really helpful. We have one last outdoor service we're doing at the end of August, the 29th. It is at June and Larry Vonderchek's house. Social committee is planning an ice cream social. Have I got that right? Ice cream Sundays. Okay, and that's going to happen after that service, but probably after you eat your own picnic lunch. Bring your own picnic lunch. There's a pond to swim in if you like swimming. And that's on August 29th. It will be at Larry and June Vonderchek's. We'll give you more details about that, but that's coming up, and we're excited about that. And drinks will be provided. So if you come, bring your lunch, you want to stay, and there'll be ice cream and all of that. That'll be great. That'll be our last outdoor service for this summer. Our call to worship this morning is out of Revelation chapter 4, verse 11. You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. Let's sing together one of the great hymns ever written at Calvary.
Years I spent in vanity and pride, caring that my Lord was crucified, knowing not it was for me he died at Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied.
verses 7 through 12. Let me invite you to stand for the reading of God's Word.
The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. Then the name of the star, is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water, because it was made bitter. Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night.
Thank you. You may be seated. The scriptures that tell of God's judgment of mankind seems harsh. But the reality is, man at that point in our future history will have had many opportunities to praise, recognize, and at least acknowledge the existence of God in Christ.
Cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in justice to the entrance sealed by heavy stone, Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, O Lord our God. Then on the third and break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, tremble death, where is your sting? The angels roar, for Christ the King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, O Lord our God. He shall return in robes of white. The blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face.
your Son, Jesus Christ, be not just words we speak or sing in church to music, but may it be lived out in our lives in such a way that people see us as different because of you and your grace and mercy and forgiveness over our weakness and sin, so that you might be glorified in all that we say and do. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. We're going to meet the kids up here for a moment and talk about things that go bump in the night and things you're afraid of. All right, guys, I brought some things with me. Find a place to squeeze in there. We're talking bags. I was going to put everything in bags and call it bags of fear, because bags of fear sounds really good, right? So we're going to talk about some things that scare you and frighten you. I'm going to have 4 people come up, and if you're the kind of person who gets really scared, you're the kind of person I want, okay? I don't want you to come up and be all brave. So if you're brave, don't raise your hand. I don't want any brave people here. I want chicken people. I want people who go balk, balk, balk in the night and are scared of every little thing, because we have a lot of things that we should be afraid of. Who wants to be my first fearful person? Yeah. All right, Robert. Yeah, see, because you're already afraid. That's why I watch you. Malachi, you afraid of things? You're not afraid of anything? You just get out of your bed and come to Mom when you're afraid? All right. All right, we'll start with Jared, and then we'll go here, here, and there. All right, Jared, come up here. I got something in here. Not this one. I got something in here that, now, first we'll see if you can guess what it is. It's long. It has a forked tongue, and it slithers. What do you think it is? It's a snake. You ready? You want to get closer to see it better? I didn't see you move any closer. Are you ready? There! I was going to get a real snake, but I'm too scared of them. So I wasn't going to get a real snake. Thank you for playing. You have a seat. You don't get the items that are scary. All right, that was the first one. That wasn't so bad. I started with the easiest first. Okay, someone else who's scared. Okay, I gotta wait on you. Yeah, definitely. Let's go here, and then okay. All right. So wait. You don't even know what we're going for here. And we're just gonna move this. Okay, it's in here. Okay, what I have in here. Have you heard of dinosaurs? Okay, dinosaurs are called prehistoric creatures. You know why they're called prehistoric? Because it's before history. Because dinosaurs lived and people weren't writing books and they didn't draw pictures of them, right? So it's called prehistoric. I have in here a prehistoric creature. Now, I got to hold it down when I flip this up. Okay, this is a prehistoric creature. You ready to see it? You sure? I'll move it closer. Is it better if I move it closer? Ready? Wait, no. It's covered up because it's cold. There it is. No, it's not a rock. It's a trilobite. Huh. These would crawl all over your body. Except this is a small one. The bigger ones are like this big. You can go sit down. Done with you. All right. Okay. I got 2 more things. These are actually the bags of fear. I got 2 bags here. The bags of fear. All right. I said I was going to go. I'm going to go with 2 girls now. I did 2 boys. So we'll go with you. Yeah. Okay. So here we got the bags of fear. Now, I'm not going to let you look in this yet. But this is something that can destroy your health, can make you sick. Let me put this down. To the point where, well, the worst could happen. You ready? You sure? How about if I just have you reach in without looking? Reach your hand in. Reach your hand in. Come on, reach your hand in. Pull it out. No, it's not a donut, it's a ding dong. It's a ding dong. Destroy your health. Kill you. I mean, it's terrible. I'm going to save that for my lunch. Okay. You can have a seat. Thank you. All right. One last one. One last. Come on up. Bags. These are the bags of fear. Bags of fear. Okay. What I have in here, best if people see your face. Because what's in here will turn you into a monster. A horrible person that everyone despises and hates. Do you want to be the kind of person everybody hates? You don't really care about friends. Once you have this, you don't need friends, because you will be a monster and everybody will run and hide from you. Are you ready for what's in here? You can reach in there. Money. And because I don't want you to be a monster, and I don't want you to be destroyed, because they say the love of money is the root of all evil, and if you love this, you could become the most evil person in the world. Money. You love it? Oh, from the mouths of a brother. Well, guys, I want you to see one more thing. There's a lot of things in the world to be afraid of, but I wanted you to see a picture. Go ahead and put that picture up. Oh, I guess I didn't put it as a picture. So here's a phrase that Jesus gave. It is I, do not be afraid. Do you know when he said that? When he was walking on the water. The disciples get in a boat and they're crossing the lake. And they get into a huge storm and they're about to die. And they see what looks like a ghost walking across toward them. And they're afraid. They're not only afraid of the storm, they're afraid of the ghost walking toward them. And then one of them looks and says, I think it's Jesus. Jesus gets closer, and here's what he says to them. It is I, do not be afraid. He walks all the way up to them, gets in the boat, and the boat immediately goes to the other side of the lake. Now, I don't know about you, but the storm would frighten me. I've been in a canoe on a lake in Alaska in a storm, and that was not pleasant. There were 3 of us in a canoe. It was a little overweighted. We were heading across, and a storm came rolling in. We're halfway across this lake. We've got probably 25 more minutes to paddle our boat, and the storm comes in, and I'm scared. If I was in that boat and I saw something walking toward me in that lake, that would be doubly frightening. The fact that Jesus got in and then the boat miraculously went to the other shore, that's a lot. There's an awful lot of things to be afraid of, kids. From storms to diseases to bullies to bad grades in school. And Jesus says, don't be afraid, because I know where you are. I know what you need, and I'll get you to where you need to go. So you guys can go off to Children's Church if that's where you're headed, or back to your families. And we will see you again next week. You know where you're going, Addie? That way. You want to come up here? Okay. All right. Okay. Goodbye. Go see Grandma. There you go. She never comes to me, so we thought we'd take an opportunity. Somehow I'm frightening. I don't know how that could be. What is more frightening? The unknown or the known revisited? You know, back about, what was it, November 2019? December 2019, there was these rumblings of news that there was something happening in China. There were some people getting sick. And then it got in, they says, and people were going, there's this sickness, and people are getting sick, and it seems pretty bad, and And then as news, it had gotten out, and it was in, I can't remember if it was in Italy or where it was in Europe, and then said, well, it's not going to come. And then there was a case, I think it was in Seattle, Washington, maybe it was Oregon. And there was this unknown. And then there was talk about, well, where to come from and what can we do about it, and we've lived that. We've lived our own world of unknowns. And then, success was achieved, and vaccines and protocols worked and flattened the curve, and businesses reopened. And then you heard rumblings. Well, there's a variant. There's an alpha, and there's a beta, and there's a delta. And so what's more frightening? The unknown that we lived through 18 months ago? Or the known, kind of the known, coming back? Revisited? How do you fear something you have not known to be a threat? I thought about that. Can you fear something that you don't know is a threat? Some people walk around life just afraid of things. I mean, they don't know that there's an actual threat, but they're afraid of them. I don't fear a lot of stuff. And the stuff I fear comes out a result of having experienced something, and then it leads to a bit of fear. But usually if I've experienced something, I don't fear it anymore because I've experienced it, and obviously I lived through it, right? If you fall off a roof, you fall off the third story of a ladder. You have a ladder up to the third story, and the ladder falls. You ever been there? Some of you maybe been there. I've been there. 16 years old, I'm on top of a ladder. We're putting siding on a house at the peak, and the ladder starts to go. So what do? I ride the ladder till I'm about 6 feet off the ground, then I jump off the ladder. I figure I can handle a 6-foot jump, but I'm not going to handle a 30-foot jump. Well, once you've fallen off a ladder, there's not really a lot of fear in it. If God were trying to move all of mankind, do you suppose he would try and surprise them with something brand new, some brand new disaster, some brand new plague that nobody has ever thought of, nobody's ever heard of? Or would God warn man about a cataclysm that's about to come? Would he say, hey, this is about to come, and you know what we're talking about. Are you going to change your ways? Are you going to adjust your thinking? So which is more frightening? What's more frightening, a sudden earthquake or word that an earthquake was coming within minutes and you can't do anything about it? I mean, I've been in sudden earthquakes because we had them on occasion in Anchorage, Alaska. We never had a warning that said at 10:15 there'll be an earthquake and it's 10:03. You never get a warning with that. Imagine if you could get a warning. We work in a world where we want warnings for everything, and scientists are working on warnings for earthquakes and tsunamis and everything else. The problem is their warnings are usually only minutes. When we were at my son's wedding in Cincinnati, the sirens went off Friday night after the rehearsal for his wedding, and we're sitting at all of our places where we're staying all over the city of Cincinnati and down in Kentucky, and the warning sirens are going off. Why? It was tornado warnings. And a tornado warning means there's probably a tornado that's going to hit you, but you really can't do anything other than, all of my kids were texting each other, and so my son Caleb is staying in a house with his wife Chelsea, and his Airbnb owner texts him and says, go into the basement. There's going to be a tornado, go into the basement. Vicky at our Airbnb went outside so she could get better video of the sirens because she couldn't hear them inside because I was watching TV. So somebody's hiding in the basement, somebody else is out on the porch. Same sirens, same storm. It's a matter of your perspective. When God wanted to move Egypt to release Israel, he brought a series of what I would call environmental plagues. He brought environmental plagues on Egypt. He destroyed or beat or manipulated or damaged the environment in the land of Egypt. You find these in Exodus chapters 3 through 9, 10. If you read the book of Exodus, second book in the Bible, chapters 3 through 9 or 10, you're going to see these plagues that God brings. Now, before each of these environmental plagues, God gave Egypt the opportunity to do the right thing. He says, look, I want you to do something for me. And it was, let my people go. I want you to let the nation of Israel, all of these slaves, I want you to let them go, leave, and worship me in the wilderness. But if you won't, I'm going to do this. And the first one was he turned the Nile River into blood. He turned it into blood and killed a bunch of the fish. And the river stank, and they couldn't drink any of the water because it was just terrible. But he gave them a warning. The second warning was, if you don't let my people go, I'm going to bring frogs. Now, the other day, I think it was Michael found a frog in his yard. Wasn't that a frog you found? And you're playing with a little frog. Nothing wrong with a single frog. I don't think I want 10 million frogs. That would kind of creep me out. A dozen, probably I can handle. 100 is over the top. Covered the land in frogs that when they eventually died, they piled them up in heaps. I would call that an environmental disaster. Then he gives them another warning and says, let my people go, or I'm going to bring swarms of flies. You ever had just one fly annoy you? I mean, it just buzzes around you and it just won't leave you. Now that I've become allergic to bees and hornets and all those other things, when a fly buzzes around me, I'm afraid it's a bee or something going to sting me and I'm going to blow up again. But it's annoying. Imagine swarms of flies. Most of us wouldn't go into a place that's swarming with flies because we know why flies gather. Well, the fourth environmental plague that God brings on Egypt is he kills all their livestock. He says, let my people go, and if you won't, I'm going to kill your livestock. And they don't, and so he does. The next one is hail. He says to the nation of Egypt, let my people go, or I'm going to bring hail that's going to destroy things. And if your animals are outside, they're going to be killed by this. And I'm going to destroy the crops that are out in the field. And some of the Egyptians listened and took their animals in, and at least their animals didn't die from the hail because God brought hail. And destroyed the plants and any animals left outside. And then he brought one more environmental disaster. If there was anything left of the animals, of the plants, anything still alive, God said, let my people go, or I'm going to send locusts, and they're going to eat everything else. And so he sent locusts. Now, what I didn't mention was punctuated between those environmental plagues were 3 unwarned punishments against the Egyptian people. See, after the first 2 plagues, God gave them a warning. After they didn't listen to the first 2 plagues, he just brought lice. They got lice. It was a personal punishment on people. So then he brings 2 more plagues, the ones I've already mentioned, and they didn't listen. So what does he bring? He brings boils. I don't know if you've ever had a boil. If you ever had an infection in a part of your body. I had one in high school. Most painful thing I ever had. And it was not only painful, it was worse when the doctor dealt with it. It was one of those times when you have that much pain, you think you're going to pass out. And it's so vivid in my mind that I don't ever want that again. It was in my arm. It was in this arm or this arm. I don't remember which. And he brings boils. Well, when they failed to listen to the last 2 warnings, the hail and the locusts, he brings darkness and shuts down the light for 3 days. Now, those personal attacks could not be avoided or prevented. He didn't give them any warning because they had already refused to submit to God. What we find in the trumpet judgments in Revelation chapter 8 are similar judgments to the plague narrative of Exodus 3 through 10. But it's on a much larger scale. In the book of Exodus, God is punishing a single nation for its refusal to do a single thing. And when we find ourselves in Revelation chapter 8, we're finding the nations of the world refuse to acknowledge God. And he brings on great disasters without warning. At this point, man is not unaware of God and his role in bringing cataclysm. The sealed judgments that we reviewed earlier, that we looked at in the earlier chapters of Revelation, was God's attempt to gain the attention of man. In the end of those sealed judgments, man knows exactly who's bringing the disasters. They recognize that it is God. They hide from God. They curse God, and they want nothing to do with God. And now God brings them some additional challenges. There's no reason to think that man in Revelation 8 is ignorant of the source, who is God, and the cause, which is his rebellion. The question is, will man move? Will he move? As God brings challenge into his life, will he move? Will the preceding judgments drive him to repentance, or will he harden his heart? We find that in the narrative in Exodus, that the Pharaoh hardened his heart and hardened his heart and hardened his heart. And then God hardened his heart. Will man in Revelation 8, 9, and 10, will he seek God? Will he cry out to God, or will he curse God? Will he cry for mercy, or will he speak against God? Will it take just one more example of God's displeasure, or will man just dig in his heels? Exodus chapter 9, verse 18 is where I want to start this morning. Exodus chapter 9, verse 18 says this: Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause a very heavy hail to rain down, such as not been in Egypt since the founding until now. Then in verse 24 of Exodus 9 it says this: So there was hail, and fire mingled with hail, so a very heavy that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. And it says, verse 25, that the hail struck every herb of the field and broke every tree of the field. When Egypt failed to humble themselves before God and let Israel go, God struck them with hail that brought destruction to plants and trees in the nation of Egypt. And as you read the narrative, the land of Goshen, part of the great Egyptian peninsula where Israel lived, was unaffected. Now we find in Revelation chapter 8, on a global scale, man has turned from God. And in chapter 8, verse 7, it says this: The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood. And they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The first trumpet judgment is an attack on plants. It is interesting, if you read the Genesis narrative, chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis, the very beginning of the Bible, the first words God wants us to know about where we came from, it says in there in the narrative that at one point God said, let the plants grow forth, let the trees and the grass, let them have seed within themselves so they can repopulate and breed and grow and cover the earth. And he says at the end of that statement, and it was good. He looks at all the plant life on the planet and he goes, it's good, it's good. Now we understand today there's weeds and there's thistles and there's all sorts of things that annoy us, but that's part of the curse. When man sins, God says, now I'm going to bring forth weeds and thistles and all the things that annoy you. But when he started off, every plant life was good. It was glorious. And now the first cataclysmic event brings hail and fire. It is supernatural yet natural. It's a supernatural, natural event. So what God does is he doesn't bring something brand new. He brings something people are familiar with, but he brings it on such a scale that the trees and the grass are destroyed. The trees and the grass are destroyed. You say, well, big deal. Well, this environmental impact is actually rather severe. So I did some reading about, so what is the benefit of trees? And I knew some things off the top of my head was the benefit of trees, but I got to see some statistics that were a little surprising to me. You know that trees provide oxygen. We know that. They talk about don't cut down the rainforest because we're going to lose the oxygen we need. Well, it's not true. Most of the oxygen that we breathe comes from plankton. It doesn't come from trees. Trees make a percentage of it, but a mature tree, if you have 2 mature trees in your yard, they provide enough oxygen for a family of 4 to live. So you could take 2 trees, grow them in an airtight bubble, be in that airtight bubble, and it would produce enough oxygen for you to breathe. So any disaster movie where a guy's like locked in a safe or he's buried under the ground, there's limited oxygen, they just need to give him a tree or 2. Because the tree will solve his problems. Well, more than trees produce oxygen, trees are a carbon dioxide sink. I didn't know what that meant. I read it, and then I read about it. It means they absorb the carbon dioxide, the stuff that's not good for you, and they like carry it all in and wrap their arms around it and then spit out oxygen. They take in the carbon and give back the oxygen. So trees are pretty important. And I thought, well, okay, so we know something about trees, but trees do not produce the bulk of the oxygen we need. Plankton does. So it's in the sea, it's other places, it's not really trees. You can probably cut down all the trees. I read one report that says you can cut down all the trees in the world and we'd still have oxygen because the other plants produce a lot more. But what about the grass? So I read this statistic about grass. Do you know how many animals would cease to exist if there was no grass to eat? And they were showing this whole chain of animals that would be gone because the ones at the bottom of the food chain live on grass, and if they don't exist, the ones higher up the food chain have nothing to eat, and it would be devastating to the animal kingdom if the grass was gone. And included in grass is things like rice and wheat. All the grains we think of are actually literally grasses that we eat. And if you lose the grass, as we've seen in parts of the world, when you lose the grass, you create deserts, dust bowls, and sandstorms. When you lose the grass. That's why if you go to some of the beaches, particularly on the east coast of the United States, you go to some of the beaches, they have all these protected areas along the dune bank, the banks of the dunes. Why? Because they're protecting the grass, because without the grass, they would lose everything. And you say, well, we want sand on the beach, but you don't want the entire area to become sand. The impact upon man here is more impending than immediate. When you think about it, it's more impending. It's like eventually the loss of the trees and the grass will impact my life. Not immediately. Yes, I might lose my apple tree. An oak might fall down and hit my car. I might not have to mow my grass, but the impact later will start to feel itself. The scope of this crisis, though, what's interesting in the text is it's fractional. It's only 1/3. It's not total. God doesn't destroy everything, only a portion of it, a fraction of it. But the extent of the crisis is global, not regional. To go after 1/3 of everything is not to go after a region. There's no region that is 1/3 of the world. So you can't say this is an attack on Asia or North America or South America or Australia. It's still global. It's not regional. Just as the gospel was never meant to be regional, but was meant to be global. Revelation chapter 8, verse 8. Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and 1/3 of the sea became blood, and 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. The second trumpet is an attack on the sea. There's an attack on the plants, now there's an attack on the sea. The second cataclysmic event appears to be a comet or an asteroid. I tried to figure out what the difference was, a comet and an asteroid. And I read some stuff and I didn't know because they kept using the terms back and forth. So I'm just going to say comet and or asteroid. Something from the sky comes down and hits the earth. Now, the largest modern asteroid to hit the earth was I'm going to try and read this, Chelyabinsk. The Chelyabinsk asteroid hit the earth. It was 20 meters across. 20 meters, like 60, 70 feet. So it's as the meteor, the asteroid was as big as like this auditorium in length, right? 20 meters across. It made an impact that did $30 million worth of damage when it hit. $30 million worth of damage. Do you know that Ganymede is one of the asteroids close to us? It is 25 miles across. It's 25 miles across. So the last one that hit the world was 20 meters. The one that's close to us is 25 miles across, and they just found a new comet in the last 2 months. A new comet was discovered. It is somewhere between 62 and 124 miles across. That's the newest comet discovered that's within the realm of our concern. I don't even know how to pronounce this. It's the Chicxulub impact. This was an impact that was made in Mexico in prehistoric times that scientists believe is what killed the dinosaurs. There was an impact. An asteroid hit the world, made an impact. The crater is 93 miles across and 12 miles deep. That's the impact. You can see it today. It's underwater. That impact being 93 miles across means the rock was way smaller. Imagine 100-mile across rock hits the earth. Now, the scriptures here say the impactor is mountain-sized. Mountain-sized. It's the size of a mountain. A mountain would be at least several miles across at its base. And as a result of this, it apparently hits the sea. So it doesn't hit land. It lands in the water. But as a result of it, it poisons the sea, kills the fish. Here's an interesting statistic. 10% of the world is completely dependent on fish for their diet. 10% of the world. That's 800 million people. 800 million people in our world have to have fish to live. Consider a third of the fish killed, you are now threatening the livelihoods of 300 million people. We go, oh, who cares if a bunch of fish die? I don't even like fish. Well, worldwide, 15% of our diet is made up of fish worldwide for all people on the planet. Now, the turbulence, apparently, of this impact destroys 1/3 of the ships. Now, you're thinking cruise ships haven't sailed for more than a year. Who cares? I was astounded by this statistic. 90% of the world's freight is moved by sea. 90% of the freight in the world is moved on the oceans. 80% of all trade in the world, all trade, not just freight, but all trade is moved by ships. Wipe out 1/3. How many of you remember the run on toilet paper? How many of you saw the price of lumber skyrocket? What have they said to us so often? Well, it's a supply chain issue. We can't get the stuff from A to B. Imagine 1/3 of the supply chain in the world is gone. What happens to the world when the food supply is devastated by the destruction of the fish and interrupted by the destruction of the supply chain? And God brings all of this without warning. He says, you haven't been listening. So in Revelation chapter 8 and verse 10, it's only been 2 angels now. The 3rd angel sounds, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. It fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of the water. The name of the star is wormwood. 1/3 of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. Now, I've tasted bitter water. It's generally filled with sulfur and other minerals that just don't taste good. This 3rd attack, this 3rd judgment is an attack on the water supply. This star, the word star here, can go 2 different directions. It could be a celestial body, but it just as easily could be an angel, because early on in the book of Revelation, the angels have been called the stars. They've been called stars. So this could be an angelic being that God sends down to poison 1/3 of the water. Now, groundwater is what we find under the ground that our wells tap into, that comes forth up in springs. Groundwater makes up 30% of all fresh water on the planet, is groundwater. Rivers only make up 1%. You know where the other 69% of groundwater, of fresh water lies? In glaciers. So think about this. God attacks the 31% of the water that's available for us to consume. We're not going to be able to go to the Arctic, grab an iceberg, pull it down here, and melt it to drink. 69% of all fresh water is found in ice, and it's not available. But the 31% that is, he attacks 1/3 of it. Now, you know as well as I do, water determines where people live. And if you choose to live in a place where there isn't water, you got to figure out how to get water there. That's where they're struggling now in places like California, where they moved to places where there was no water and decided to bring the water from hundreds of miles away so they could live in this beautiful environment, but there's no water. When the water runs out, nobody's going to live in California or other places on the planet when there's no water there. And God says in this judgment, I'm going to wipe out 1/3 of it so that you can't drink it, and some will even die if you drink it. Do you think that will increase chaos, panic, a bit of suffering? Let me take you back for a moment to Exodus chapter 10. Exodus chapter 10 and verse 21 says this, "Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, darkness which may even be felt. For 3 days thick darkness covered all of the land of Egypt." That part is found in Exodus chapter 10. Revelation chapter 8 verse 12 says this, "Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened, and a third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night." Now, we can understand when it says a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. We can understand what that means. That would mean as you look up into the night sky and you see 1,000 stars, that all of a sudden 333 of them disappear. It's like, they're gone. And now there's only like 666 stars left in the sky. So you understand it. But what does it mean, a third of the sun and a third of the moon? I mean, is it going to be like, it's like a partial eclipse? I don't know. But the fourth judgment attacks light. Now here's what's interesting. When you think about the concept of light in the Bible, what is the first thing we find in the first day of creation? God said, let there be light. The first thing he creates is light. Darkness doesn't exist. Darkness only exists in the absence of light. Okay? Darkness doesn't have a substance to itself. There aren't darkness waves. I know they talk about black holes, and now they've looked into one of these grand black holes, and they're finding light in the other end of it. So it's kind of screwing up the whole idea of what a black hole is, because they're seeing now light at the other end of the black hole. So maybe it's not really a hole, maybe it's a tunnel. I just hadn't been able to see all the way down it. But darkness doesn't have a substance. There aren't like darkness waves. Oh, watch out, the darkness waves are coming over and it's going to get dark. No, it's the absence of light. So God said, when he started everything, he said, let there be light. Then he said this to us through his son Jesus. He said what? You are what? The light of the world. He says, yes, there's the light that I've created, which exists, the sun, and it gives light during the day, and the moon gives light during the night, and the stars help you to navigate and see the world as it is. But I want you to be the light of the world. He says, let your light shine before men, that they may see what? Your good works, and glorify your Father in heaven. So we are to show our Father in heaven through the way we behave, through the things we do, to the works that we have, which is a light to the world, even in the middle of a world that's encompassed with light. But here's an interesting thing that John gives us from the Lord. What if man rejects God's light? What happens if man says, now, you might be the light of the world, but I don't think your light is really all that great? Well, here's what Jesus says, and this is the condemnation. That the light has come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. So God makes light, and it exists, and it never goes away. The sun always is there, and when our planet turns, we get to see it every day. And then he says, I'm going to make followers who are going to be light to everybody. And you're going to spread that light over the whole planet, and they have. Christianity has spread to every corner of the globe. So that people can see the light of good works that represents the Father who is in heaven. But then Jesus says there's going to be a whole bunch of people who say, I don't want that light. I would prefer darkness to light, because I want to do what I want to do. I want to do evil deeds, not good deeds. I don't want to be a good worker. I don't want to do good works. I want to do evil things. I want to do things that feed me. That's why we have ding-dongs and money. We have money so we can show how much superior we are to somebody else. So what do we find here? In man's rebellion against God, since man refuses to repent, and that's what this is all about, God brings dark. The sun gives less light. Less light. The moon is less bright, and the stars no longer twinkle like they did. So a third of the stars are gone, and you can't find them. Imagine the scientists. Imagine scientists today if a star suddenly disappeared off their star chart. Would that make news? We just lost a star. It didn't blow up. It didn't supernova. It's just gone. Wait a minute, there's another one. It's gone, it's gone, it's gone. A third of them, they're gone. That can't happen. Stars are nuclear fission, explosion, things that are going on. They can't just go out. We know how science works. They can't just leave. So a third of the stars go, and somehow the sun doesn't give as much light as it did. I don't know if people are measuring the sun. I don't know if they're regular. I know we get impacts by those solar storms that spew out a little farther, and all of a sudden it affects our lives here on the planet. Is it somehow they're going to be shorter days? So everybody's day is shorter? Will it be dimly overcast? I mean, I don't know if you like an overcast day. Would you like it all day, every day? I know we live in Ithaca area, cloudiest city in the country. Will God simply reduce the intensity of the nuclear reactions in the stars? Will he just simply change the physics? I don't know. Here's the question. How will man handle the dark? How will man handle the dark? If it gets dark at first, I would be somewhat like, man, it's cloudy again today. Yeah, kind of disappointed. What's it like? The other day, I was out, it was yesterday. Yeah, that's where it was, yesterday. So I'm up in Rochester about 8 o'clock yesterday morning. I'm on the beach in Rochester because we're going to have a vaulting competition up there that I went, took a couple vaulters up there. And we're on the beach, and it's overcast. It's kind of cloudy. And I'm there with another coach friend of mine. He says, oh, this is great. This is great. I would love, if it just stays cloudy all day, this would be great. We're standing out here all day long in the sun. It'll just be cloudy. Well, the clouds didn't stay. It got sunny. It got bright. It got hot. I come driving back down home here. I'm going to pick Vicki up. We're going to go out for the afternoon. And I'm driving. I turn onto Bradley Street, and it's like a light switch goes off because my street is so dark because of all the trees. And it depressed me in that moment. I'm just being very honest with you. I like sunshine. I've been in the sunshine all morning. I get here 2 o'clock in the afternoon, turn down off of Seneca Road onto Bradley Street, and it's like, boom. I'm going, this is why I'm so depressed. Because I live on Bradley Street. We could just cut down these trees. I'm waiting for Trumpet Judgment 1. Get rid of the trees so I can have some bright sunshine because, bright sunshine gives you vitamin D. Vitamin D makes you smile. I don't know how it all works. But imagine if it's dark. 9 years in Anchorage wore me out. The long winters. It was dark all the time. It was just dark. And it didn't make up for it that it was light all summer. It was just dark because summer seemed to go by so fast and the dark seemed to last so long. So imagine the world becomes disappointed, confused, frustrated, anxious, eventually depressed, maybe distressed, maybe desperate, maybe despairing. So how does man respond to a life globally disrupted? How do you respond to that? How do you respond to where the plant life, plants may take months or years to recover, where the food supplies may not return, maybe the fish don't come back, where water is more difficult to find, and where there's unending gloom? How does man respond to that? Well, here's what's interesting. Verse 13 doesn't give us man's response. It gives us God's next statement. Woe, woe, woe. He says, I looked and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven. After these 4 trumpet judgments, there's an angel flying around heaven. And here's what he says. He's not bringing another judgment. Here's what he's saying. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the 3 angels who are about to sound. Revelation chapter 8, 7 through 12 gives us this glimpse into God saying to man who continues to rebel, continues to refuse to repent, continues to refuse to move at all toward God, he says to them, here's what I'm going to bring. I'm going to disrupt your life on every single level. From the food you eat, to the things you want to buy, to the water you drink, to your emotional mood. And I've got 3 more. And the angels in heaven who have seen what is happening bring a message that says it's just going to get worse. So this morning as I was reading through this again, I went, man, I don't really have a word of encouragement. Because sometimes God needs to say to us, have you been paying attention to me who's trying to move you? Are you paying attention to how I am maybe disrupting your life a bit? And have you caught that maybe some of that is because you're walking down the wrong path? You're thinking the wrong thoughts. You're dwelling on the wrong truths. So sometimes the text of the scriptures doesn't end with, and in the end it's all good. Sometimes it ends with, watch out, because God's real serious about the truth. In these 4 judgments, he attacks the things he made and said was good in order to lead man back to the truth. Dear Father, we thank you, Lord, for the unvarnished truth that you give us. Yes, we read in Revelation what appears to be future judgments to generations and people that we probably assume we would not be part of. Yet we don't have to turn to many other pages within the scriptures to find people who thought the same thing and experienced your hand on them. And we don't have to read many places in the scriptures. We don't find a description of ourselves and our failure to live for you. Our failure to consider the consequences of our sin, our waywardness, our ignorance, our laziness. We don't have to read very far to see that if we claim to follow you and your Spirit dwells within us, the Spirit is always attempting to guide us into truth and is always leading us to do works of righteousness and is always encouraging us to be a light that reflects you. Help us, Lord, not to quench that Spirit, ignore his leading in words, and venture out into paths of our own making that deny your sovereign will over our lives. Help us, Lord, as we sing, as we speak, as we read your word, as we pray, to open ourselves to be honest before you. We pray this in Christ's name.
I will sing of your great love. I will stand in wonder of what you've done in this life. With my song testify, I will live and not die to declare mercy